Hello everyone and welcome to our training today on physical development and active play for children. So happy that you're all taking this training today. This is such an incredibly important topic. Physical development and active play is something that is required by child care licensing. It must take place every single day in our license programs, but understanding the appropriate way to participate in active play in a developmentally appropriate fashion is so important for our young children. Before we get started, let's go over a couple of housekeeping items. This training has been approved by the Texas Early Child Development Professional Development System, otherwise known as TechPEDS. So before you complete your assessment at the end of this course, make sure that your personal TechPEDS ID is entered onto your portal on timthetrainer.com. That way your training certificates will be uploaded into your TechPEDS account. If you have any questions about the training material today, or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training material, you can interact with us a couple of different ways. You can go to our website, timthetrainer.com. In the upper right-hand corner, you can send us a message directly through our website with any questions that you have, or if you need additional information. You can call us or you can shoot us an email. That way we can interact with you in a timely manner to answer your questions and get additional information to you. One more quick reminder, child care licensing does require training that is completed in a reasonable amount of time. The way I look at this is the total clock hours of training that you complete in a single day cannot exceed the total number of hours that you worked in that day. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So our objectives for today is so that participants will understand the requirements for active play and the child care minimum standards. We're going to go over that really quickly. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on what the requirements are for minimum standards. We want you to understand the 4 phases of motor development with young children. And then we're going to go into practice and understand developmentally appropriate activities for each of the age group served in early education settings. So that is our objective right there as we kind of move forward. All right, so when we look in the child care minimum standards under terms and definitions, this was a piece of legislation that was passed by our lawmakers here in Texas. Very big celebration when this was finally passed. We worked really hard for many, many years to get this legislation passed and added to the child care minimum standards. But we are required to have physical activity in our programs. There are 2 different definitions that you're going to see here. Moderate physical activity, which is the level of activity for a child that are intensified faster than a slow walk, but still allows the child to talk easily. Moderate physical activity increases the child's heart rate and breathing rate. Vigorous physical activity is a repetitive physical movement for a child that uses large muscle groups, causing the child to breathe rapidly and only enabling the child to speak in short phrases. Typically, the child's heart rate is substantially increased, and the child is likely to be sweating while engaging in vigorous physical activity. You want to be aware of both because in your early education classroom, based on the child's developmental, emotional, and mental needs, you're going to have a combination of both moderate and vigorous physical activity. When we look at activity plan requirements, the child care minimum standards does require us to have a minimum of 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous active play for toddlers, that is your 12 to 17 month olds, and a minimum of 90 minutes of moderate to vigorous active play for pre-kindergarten age children. So that would be the rest of the children in your program. For infants, they're going to talk about outdoor time is required based on the individual infant's tolerance level. But today we're really talking about active play and not necessarily outdoor play. I just bring that up because a lot of times when people look in the child care minimum standards, there is some confusion between the outdoor play requirements and the physical activity requirements. And those are two completely different requirements. It's not something that's one and together. Now, your active play can be done outside, so you can kind of double dip into that time. But you'll notice that when we talk about outdoor play is required 60 minutes per day for a full-time program, but we require 90 minutes of physical activity. That means you can't just take the children outside for 60 minutes a day and meet the requirements for physical activity. For your pre-kindergarten age children, there is an additional 30 minutes of physical activity that's going to need to be done inside in the classroom or in a gym or whatever is your building premises right there. All right. This has become a very commonly cited item with child care licensing, that you're not getting the full 90 minutes of physical activity. So I wanted to make sure we brought that up right there. There is a 30-minute difference between the 60 and 90. All right. So when we look at physical development and active play in early education, we kind of look at, the human body has two muscular systems. We have our gross motor system, or you commonly hear this referred to as large muscles. And that is, your head, your torso, your legs, and your arms. These are your large muscles. Then we have our fine motor system, or small muscles, and that is your eyes, your hands, and your fingers. The way our body develops is development occurs first in the head region, and then it goes down into the torso, and last in the legs and the feet. So I always like to explain this, that development occurs from the top to the bottom. So, when you think about an infant, when you think about a toddler, when an infant is first born, they're just kind of, really flabby right there. They gain the muscles in their neck first so that they can hold up their heavy head, and then eventually they start forming muscles in their torsos, and then their arms and their legs whenever they start sitting up, propping up on belly time, and eventually being able to stand up. Development also progresses from the center of the body outward. So again, you think of the torso being developed, and then the arms and the legs, and then eventually the fingers and the toes. All right, so you can kind of think of it like a firework. It's right here in the center, and then it goes and goes outward. All right, so again, this means that the infant can control the movement of their head, their neck, and their shoulders before they can move their hands and their feet. All right. And again, I'm saying this and I want to give the visuals. So, the younger the child is that you're working with, you kind of start at the top and go down. You kind of start in the center and you go outward the older that they get. We also look at motor development being divided up into 4 different phases. We have the reflexive motor phase, the rudimentary motor phase, the fundamental motor phase, and then finally the sports-related movement phase. And I'm going to break each one of these down and explain each one of them so that you'll kind of understand what we're talking about here. So the reflexive motor phase, this occurs during the first 6 months of life right here. So this is mainly for your infant teachers. These actions are involuntary, all right? So these are basically things that we are born to be able to do. Sucking, gasping, blinking, yawning, and coughing. These are your involuntary actions. Other actions such as the movement of the legs and the arms, kicking and waving motions, these are random and uncontrolled at this point. They're unconsciously done. All right. And when we talk about development, all right, because a big part of what we do in early education is not just ensuring that the children are getting their active play, but it's also monitoring and taking notes on their development. when you're doing your anecdotal records, all right, when you're doing your developmental checklist. If you notice that a child is not doing a particular action or they're falling behind, these are items that you want to document, and during your parent-teacher conferences, you can kind of bring these up on your developmental milestone checklist right here. The rudimentary motor phase, this is where we start to work, all right? This is where you come in, the early educator. And when you're working in those infant toddler classrooms, you get to start noticing and working on these skills right here. So the child rolling over, the child learning to sit up, the child learning to crawl, creeping, standing, and eventually walking. These are the children's first voluntary actions. And you kind of want to look at these in this particular order right here. They're going to start rolling over first, and you can kind of get down at the child's level, get way down there close to the floor, and talk to the child and say, oh, there you are, I see you. You know, where's Cynthia? Where's Cynthia? And then when Cynthia turns and you look, you go, oh, there she is. There's Cynthia. And then you get up and move to the other side, right? And then you go, where did Cynthia go? Where's Cynthia? And then they'll kind of roll over and turn the head. There she is. There's Cynthia. All right. And again, we want them to be able to move their head back and forth. Eventually, they start sitting up. They kind of do the gorilla stance starting off. And then as they build the muscles in their back and their neck, they'll be able to prop themselves up. And again, we can encourage that with different sensory toys, items for them to look at and eventually reach up and grasp. We do want to encourage crawling, and we understand that some children will start walking before they crawl. If that happens, that's cool, but we still want to encourage them to crawl. Crawling is essential for reading skills, all right? It's about the pattern and the sequences, the bilateral movement of moving both sides of the body, the flexibility in the brain with our executive functions. So, you know, crawling right there is good. Even those of you working in 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-old classrooms, as children are learning to read and gaining those reading skills, you can enhance that by doing activities in those older classrooms where you encourage them to crawl. Really good for the brain right there. You know, creeping is kind of like your army man movement where they're kind of using their arms to pull themselves. They may have the muscle in their arms, but they don't have the muscles in their legs yet. So they almost drag their feet, but they're pulling with the army man crawl. That's what we talk about with creeping right there. We can encourage standing by, you know, having a low table or item that the child can pull themselves up on. Make sure that it's nice and sturdy so that it doesn't tip over. Make sure that it's got rounded edges and not sharp edges because they will fall. All right, that's just something that's going to happen right there. We want to make sure that it's safe. You know, any of y'all that have taken my director credential course or any of my risk management courses, you know, I always encourage any furniture and equipment that is purchased for your classroom. Always make sure that you're purchasing furniture and equipment from a manufacturer that specializes in commercial early education classrooms. That way the furniture and equipment is made for our type of environment. It's heavy, it's sturdy, it's safe, right? And that's what we're going for. If you go to a retail establishment to buy furniture and equipment, when you're buying it at a retail establishment, that is made for home use and it's not made for commercial use. That could lead to a safety issue, you know, and children could be severely hurt in our type of setting on that type of equipment. All right. And I bring this up because when we talk about physical development and active play, it's so incredibly important that you have furniture and equipment that is built for the number of children that we are caring for and educating at one time. All right. Hopefully that makes sense to you right there. All right. Walking, we want to encourage that walking. We can do lots of different activities where you're walking backwards and having the child follow you. Once again, using sensory toys or familiar pieces of equipment that engage the child's interest so that they will follow you. Again, giving a lot of praise and encouragement, a lot of celebration when the child attempts the new skill. So they don't have to master the new skill, just the attempt of the new skill. Lots of celebration, praise, and encouragement. We never want to do anything that's going to shame or belittle the child, especially when it does come to physical development and active play. Remember, they are learning and practicing these skills right here. All right, the fundamental motor phase. This is where the real fun begins right here. So those of you working in 2-year-old classrooms, 3-year-old classrooms, pre-K classrooms, man, you have just got the best opportunity to have lots of fun with physical development and active play right here. So your fundamental motor phase, this is where we're going to start encouraging running. And yes, I did say encouraging running, all right? Now, a lot of these physical development skills, we do want to encourage. You just want to make sure that you're providing the right opportunity and the right environment for the children to be safe and successful. Children are going to practice these skills, all right? Whether you initiate it, whether you plan it or not, these skills are going to get practiced. So it's always important that you provide the right opportunity and the right environment at the right time for them to have these physical impulses, all right? I know we may say no running in the classroom, but tell the children where they can run, all right? You can run when you go outside. You can run when you go to the gym, all right? We do the same thing with climbing. Children are going to climb. That is one of the ways we learn to explore, all right? So provide them with the appropriate opportunity and the appropriate equipment and time to climb, all right? So encourage that running. Jumping, we want to have a lot of jumping opportunities in a safe environment. Now, the thing about jumping, remember the laws of gravity. What goes up must eventually come down, right? So anytime you have a situation where a child's feet are leaving the ground, the caregiver needs to be within arm's reach of that child or as close as possible because you've got the possibility of an accident right there. Jumping, again, releases chemicals out of the brain, all right? There's a lot of dopamine that is released from the brain when jumping, so it's exciting. That is not just true for children, it's also true for adults, right? We get a lot of the feel-good chemicals that are released from the brain when jumping rope, different jumping activities, dances that involve jumping. So kind of keep that in mind right there. If you're feeling a little low, feeling a little down today, do something that involves jumping. Okay, you'll be surprised at how much it helps. We've got hopping. So again, being a little bunny rabbit and hopping around the classroom, the gym, or the playground. Skipping and galloping, and kind of know the difference between the two. All right. Skipping is where we're alternating feet as we move forward. Galloping is like, you're lassoing a horse, right? You're the rodeo rider lassoing the horse, moving forward. And it's going to be a lot more difficult for children to skip than it is gallop, all right? Now, when I'm teaching this class in person, and I know that we're doing this online, so we can't actually practice some of these skills, whenever I teach this class in person, it's so much fun. because we do actually practice, right? I get my participants up and we jump and we hop and we skip and we gallop. And it's always really interesting to me the number of adults that can't skip, but they can gallop, or vice versa. They can gallop, but they can't skip, So before you start initiating, physical development and active play in your program, play some of these games yourself, all right? You as the adult need to practice the activities so that you can appropriately role model these to the children. And they're fun, all right? They're fun right there. So great. We want to practice throwing, and there's two different ways that we're going to throw objects. We're going to get to developmental domains here in just a little bit, but being able to throw a ball or a piece of equipment underhanded, and then eventually being able to throw overhanded. All right, you're going to start with the underhanded throw and then eventually move up to the overhanded. Catching, all right, and being aware that developmentally, when a child catches a ball, first, they're going to catch it with their whole body. So you want to make sure that you're using something really soft there with the younger kids right here. One of your soft gym balls, a stuffed ball, like a stuffed animal ball, a beach ball, something like that, because they're going to use their entire body to catch, right? And we don't want to knock the breath out of them. Now, the older the child gets, the different types of balls that we can use, eventually they're going to be able to catch the ball just using two hands and not their entire body, and eventually being able to catch the object with one hand as they progress developmentally. The pincer movements, that's your fingers right here. All right. So again, a lot of different activities that you can use during your fundamental motor phase, whether it's using a pair of scissors, whether it's ripping paper, peeling stickers off of a sticker sheet, right? But incorporate a lot of different fine motor pincer movements in your classroom. We do, one of the active calming techniques that we practice with both adults and with children is giving yourself an ear massage. This is very calming right here. When you give yourself an ear massage, you go up your ear, you flatten out your flaps, you go down, you do this again while taking deep breaths and giving yourself a 60-second ear massage. It's very, very calming. There's a lot of nerve endings right here. It makes a big difference. But the great thing about the ear massage is not only are we practicing active calming, but you're using your pincers to do the massage. So you're getting a double whammy out of this one right here. Great activity. You can do this in pretty much every age group right there. Now, the younger children, you're going to need to assist them, but it's a great way to get that started. The sports-related movement phase, this kind of comes on later in life. This is typically not until the average age of 7 for most children. So be careful. We don't want to push the sports-related movement phase too soon. If the child mentally and emotionally and socially are not ready for this phase of development, we see this quite often, and it could lead to frustration. It could lead to defiance if the child is not developmentally ready for this. And again, this is the average age of 7 that we start seeing this come online. Could be younger for some children if the child shows interest in the sports-related movement phase. Not so much the adult shows interest. It has to be the child that shows the interest. All right, but these are more mature movements that can be applied to different games. Children can now engage in vigorous exercise, organized games, detailed crafts with increased skills and confidence. These are going to be more of your long-term projects. These are going to be more of your organized sports, like kickball or soccer or, baseball, football for some of the older children. That's what we're talking about right here. But again, we're not just looking at the physical development of the child. You want to also keep in mind the emotional, the mental, and the social development of the child. All of those have to be in line for this to be a successful phase of development. What is the value of motor development? Why do we have this piece of legislation that was written into the child care minimum standards? Why are we pushing this? Well, gosh, there's so much value right here. And we've been talking a whole lot here lately about the value of open-ended play and how open-ended play increases creativity. It helps with self-regulation. It helps with cognitive development, academic success. We need more open-ended play. And it's the same thing with physical development. There is a difference between open-ended development and closed-ended development, all right? When we talk about organized sports, like in the previous slide, even though you're talking about kickball, soccer, those type of games, that is still closed-ended play because there's basically like a script per se that you're being followed. When you're playing baseball, you swing the bat, you hit the ball, you run to first base, and you run to second base, and you run to third base, and you come home. It's kind of on the scripted side. Open-ended play is where the child gets to kind of create the outcome, right? And that's what we want to push right here. Very beneficial. But the value of motor development, it contributes to the child's overall physical health and development. It's a huge source of pride and accomplishment. We need those natural chemicals being released from the brain, all right, to get that pride and accomplishment. And it prepares the child for participation in sports and other group activities later in life. And even though, there may be no intention either from the child or from the adult in that child's life for there to be participation in sports, there is still a huge value in motor development because the child needs to gain those social skills for other group activities later in life. So you can very easily combine motor development with social development. All right, it creates trust, it creates companionship, right? And that ability to connect with others, right? So we want to encourage that right there. Physical development and active play, it also builds muscular strength. We want our children to be strong and healthy. It strengthens the heart, so we want a good heart rate, a good circulatory system right there. It enhances their aerobic capacity, promotes muscle and joint flexibility. This is something, again, that we're really lacking in today's world, is the muscle and joint flexibility. So doing different yoga activities, Pilates activities, just basic stretching activities for the children that are age appropriate. This is beneficial to them right there. Promoting healthy body composition. We have a lot of children at such a young age, start being aware of their body awareness and what they look like. The eye-hand coordination, and then eye-foot coordination. And this is one that, again, I encourage y'all to really focus on in your early education classrooms. Look, let's be honest, the world is what it is. Children get a lot of eye-hand coordination, whether it's being on a tablet or an app or swiping or being on a video game. And even in some of our classrooms in our infant rooms, they're swiping and slapping, different toys and objects. So eye-hand coordination, we kind of think about quite often, but how often do you practice skills with eye-foot coordination, right? Where the child is watching and aware of their feet and where their feet are going. We're going to talk later on when we get to the developmental domains about body awareness and being aware of your surroundings. All right? It starts with the eye-foot coordination. You know, movement activities also increase general body awareness, visual awareness, again, so that children are attuned to their environment. They know what's going on around them. When we really talk about development over the last 5 to 7 years, I'm sure a lot of you would also agree that it's not just children, but adults too, have really lost attunement and just being aware of what's going on around them, that they're not like the only person in existence, that there are other people around them that occupy the same space, that type of situation. So creating that visual awareness so that we're aware of what's going on, the auditory awareness, kind of listening what's going on around you, the tactile awareness, so feeling and touching, right? We want that. And then directional awareness, the ability to move forward, move backwards, move sideways, and again, what's going on around you. Amongst their many social and emotional benefits, movement activities provide enjoyment for children. Let's just have fun, right? And again, we've put so much focus here lately, and we're going to continue to put a lot of focus on play and the benefit of play. We've got to get back to that. We got to get back to the basics before we can move forward, folks. And that means getting back to understanding the value of play. And play is fun, right? So when we look at the social and emotional benefits, it's the enjoyment for the children. We want them to laugh. We want them to smile. We want them to feel good about themselves. It's that opportunity for children to feel successful. It's that opportunity to promote cooperation with other children. And then we can tie this together. Movement activities also provide opportunities for cognitive learning, problem solving, language development, exploration, discovery, and creativity. Again, whenever I teach this class in person, we always kind of do this little activity where we think about our childhood, whether it's elementary school, middle school, high school, and how many of you learned something from song and movement, right? Song and movement, whether it's the presidents of the United States or state capitals or, different things like that. Hey, the ABCs, right? How many of you, when you're having to alphabetize something, you still sing the ABC song either in your head or some of us out loud, right? So, and then I bet all of these different songs that you probably still remember to this day from your early years, there was some type of movement that went along with it, right? So really cool stuff. Be creative with this. Pull out some of those old song and games that you remember as a child. Maybe adapt them just a little bit, but also come up with some new ones, right? Y'all are super creative. Come up with some new songs and activities to help your children learn, some things out there. Don't use AI. Do it yourself, y'all. Do it yourself. Let's talk about body awareness, all right? Body awareness is really important to keep in mind when focusing on physical development and active play. Body awareness is a skill that has to be learned. It is not something that comes online automatically. And I know I have worked with lots and lots of early educators over the years that make the assumption that the child should, have body awareness, have that skill down, and it's not, all right? This is something we have to work on right here. But it's the ability for the child to know where their body is at in space, all right? So these are some things that you might notice if you have a child that is struggling with body awareness. if they appear to be clumsy, if they appear to be disorganized, so they've got stuff scattered everywhere, they fall out of their chair. All right. Again, this happens all the time in our classrooms, that the child is sitting there coloring on a sheet of paper and they just fall out of their chair. Right. I even know adults that do that. There's usually other substances involved at that point. Breaking things, whether they're coloring too hard and they break a crayon in half or something like that. Difficult time moving without looking at their arms and legs. So pay attention to this. If when they're coloring or playing, they're having to watch their arms and legs, or when they're walking or running, they're having to look at their legs and their feet. This may be a sign of body awareness. They have a difficult time standing in line. They have poorly developed fine motor skills. They're unable to climb. All right. They push too hard on that pencil or crayon, like I mentioned. So here are some activities to help out with body awareness. You can have them carry a small stack of books that is appropriate for their age and development. That way, when they're walking with a stack of books, they may be focused on the stack of books that they're walking with, but they can't see their feet or their legs. All right, so they're having to move forward without seeing their feet and their legs. Doing push-ups or pull-ups, and you can even have the child stand up against the wall and keep their hands on the wall and move back and forth. That could be an alternative to your traditional push-up that we remember from when we were kids. Can't really do pull-ups because licensing, prohibits us from having playground equipment that allow the children to dangle. But that's where, again, the wall or the traditional sit-up can work right there. Different jumping activities that we talked about, playing on a jungle gym or piece of playground equipment. Simon Says is a good old classic that is really good with body awareness. And it's interesting because when you say, when you play Simon Says and you say, Simon says, take one step forward, all right? Pay attention and see how many children will look at the other children before taking that step forward, all right? That is a big indicator right there. Laying on their back and putting their feet up against the wall, all right? This is going to help with body awareness as well. Motor planning is the child's ability to figure out how to do a new motor task, right? So again, some indicators that you want to look for. Again, a child, appears to be messy. They have an awkward grip on their pencil or crayon. So they're holding their pencil or crayon, like this instead of like this. Difficult time jumping, running, or dancing. Oh, maybe me being a grown adult, maybe I've got motor planning issues because I have a very difficult time dancing. I like it, I just don't look real good doing it. No, I'm just playing. Trouble finishing a task on time, and that is an executive skill right there. Being able to, that goal achievement, that is a executive function. And imitates actions of other students rather than figuring out the movement themselves. Unable to follow directions, simple 1 or 2 part commands. All right, so again, looking at the development of the child, kind of the basic rule is you give 1 direction per age. So if you're working with a 2-year-old, you can give a 2-part direction, 3-year-old 3-part direction. That's kind of the golden rule right there. They may resist or act out or refuse to do a new activity, and that usually has to do with their confidence right there. They watch others so that they can figure out how to do a new motor activity. Pay attention to these type of indicators right here. So ways that we can help children with their motor development: break things down into smaller steps. do a lot of rolling, jumping, and ball activities. And when we talk about ball activities, it might be sitting on the floor and rolling the ball back and forth to each other rather than throwing and catching. They may not be ready for that, so rolling it on the floor is helpful. Giving one direction at a time until they get to that developmental level about the 2 and 3 part commands. Guide the student through motor activities. We've got to do a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring. Show them, tell them, show them, practice with them. Sometimes visuals, where we can have a little check-off sheet and visuals showing the different steps to the activity is helpful. Have the student orally repeat the directions for you. That is also very helpful. Watch for distractions in the room. Okay, now in all physical development and active play, I think you need to be aware of distractions in the room. All right. I know that this is fun and exciting, but it can also be very intimidating for some of the children. And if there are distractions, that could add to that intimidation right there. And again, lots and lots of visuals are going to help you out right here. Bilateral integration is the student's ability to use both sides of the body during an activity. We want to be aware of bilateral integration. And in crossing the midline, the ability to kind of cross this make-believe line that we have right down the center of your body. This is important to keep in mind, your bilateral integration and crossing the midline, because it's connecting the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Flexibility is an executive function, and flexibility is the ability to move from left hemisphere of the brain and right hemisphere of the brain and back and forth easily. That's very difficult for not just children, but even adults, right? So in order for us to kind of bridge left hemisphere and right hemisphere of the brain, lots of physical activities that involve bilateral integration and crossing the midline is going to be beneficial for that child. This also relates to self-regulation. All right. So, again, some indicators that you want to look out for right here. Student turns his or her whole body to avoid crossing the midline. So if you have a large piece of construction paper and the child is coloring, like they're moving their whole body like this to color rather than crossing that midline and going back and forth. All right. If they don't hold the paper down, so while they're coloring, the paper's going all over the place, or you can kind of see where they kind of switch hands. They'll color with their left hand and then they'll switch hands and color with their right hand. These are things that you want to look out for. Some suggestions to help with bilateral integration and crossing the midline. Carrying heavy objects that are appropriate for that age and development of child, using 2 hands, all right? Jumping jacks, because with jumping jacks, they're moving both arms and feet, both sides of the body at the same time. Mixing bowl activities. Y'all, in almost every early education classroom that I work with, I always want to encourage large mixing bowls with like the wooden or plastic spoons, and you don't even have to have anything in it. Or you can put balled up pieces of paper in there, something that's not a choking hazard, and having the child stir. All right, really good right here. Also, again, for self-regulation. Jumping rope, right? And yes, you can have jump ropes in your licensed programs. There is no regulation on this. They just have to be used appropriately and put away when not in use. We want to avoid strangulation type issues, but if they are closely supervised and used appropriately, go for it. Good stuff right there. Basketball with the dribbling, clapping games, all right, you're meeting that midline right there. Musical instruments, 2 square and 4 square activities, jumping with feet apart, and then landing with your feet apart. This is a really good activity. Have them spread their legs jump forward? Do they land with their legs spread? Or you're going to notice that they automatically will bring their legs together. Okay, so we can practice this right here. Opening containers, rolling clay, and skipping. When we talk about tactile awareness, again, these are indicators you want to look for right here. If they avoid approaching students from the back, they avoid unexpected touching of students, they don't force but encourage, participation. Oh, wait, sorry, these are suggestions right here. My apologies. Suggestions to help the students right here. Avoid approaching them from the back, all right? And y'all, anyone that works with children with signs or indicators of autism, you definitely know you never approach them from the back right there. Avoid that unexpected touching. Always let them know what you're about to do. Encourage that participation. Encourage gradual exposure to messy experiences. Washing hands, and again, children that struggle with tactile awareness, they don't like to wash their hands. They definitely don't like messy activities. So we've got to encourage this right here. Sometimes we need to have them go first, in line to avoid bumping into others, because that could be a trigger for them. You can have them push or pull heavy objects. Again, encourage them to initiate touch, right? We want that predictability right there. Rubbing various textures on arms and legs. So if you have a texture board in your program, make it large enough and design it in a way that they don't just touch it with their hands, but they're able to rub it on, like their arms and legs. That's going to be really helpful for you too. I think this is probably my favorite slide in the whole presentation right here. But tips for adding music to your movement right here. We love adding music to everything, I've gone through so many different phases of this presentation where, I used to say that being in an early education classroom is like being in a Disney movie, right? You just break out into song at any point in time. And then I, adapted it to, being an early educator is like being on Glee, right? The TV show Glee. You just break out into song, at any point in time. So I guess now it's like a TikTok video or whatever. We always want to add that music to what we're doing. Be an active, excited participant in your classroom. When we talk about physical development and active play, the children are going to feed off of your energy right there. Your involvement and your encouragement. Join in, right? Be that active participant. Talk to the children about different ways that they can move their bodies and use their voice to express themselves. Incorporate music throughout the day. And y'all, I strongly encourage you, lose the recordings, all right? Sing without recordings. Children love to hear your voice. This is not American Preschool Idol. No one is going to judge you for what you sound like, all right? The children love to hear your voice. I was working with a set of schools up in Montana a couple of years ago, and we did this challenge where, can y'all go 30 days without any recordings in the classroom? And for 30 days, it's the teacher singing, the teachers initiating the music in the classroom, and they did it. And so it's pretty cool. And now that's primarily all they do is they sing in the classrooms. It's pretty fun. All right. Y'all just have fun with this. Have fun with this. You got this. All right. I'm going to go through now just kind of some motor checklists for each of the different age groups so that you can be aware of what is developmentally appropriate for each age group, and as you're doing your active play, what you want to be looking for right here. So for your infants, we want to look and we want to encourage them to holding up their head and their chest, rolling from side to side, swiping, all right, crawling, holding their bottle, and then turning their body, all right? So this is your gross motor checklist for your infants. Pretty simple, pretty basic, but again, remember developmentally, this is what they've got. For your toddlers, for your 12 to 18 month olds, crawling after a ball. So if you roll the ball forward, are they going to chase after it crawling? Pulling up on that steady piece of furniture right there. Walking with support, so they're using the end of a table or a beam to walk, and then eventually that feeling of success when they're able to let go and walk without support. Squatting, so again, they can hold on to that steady surface and using their legs, squatting down, up and down. And then encouraging your toddlers to practice walking backwards. That's a huge developmental success right there. All right. They need a lot of practice on what happens when they step on objects. Are they going to lose their balance and fall? Even something as simple as a pin like this. Hopefully you don't have a pin on the floor, but it's just an example. Something as small as that, if they step on, they could lose their balance. How far can they lean without tipping over? That's a fun activity in a toddler classroom. How fast can they go without stumbling? Again, make sure that it's a safe environment, all right, for them. But we're working on that momentum and that balance right there. For your older toddlers, your 18 to 24 month olds, being able to carry a large toy while walking, all right, and not stumbling or dropping it or falling. Do this activity where you're like, okay, we're going to open up your head and we're going to pour in some concrete, all right, and everyone's going to run like a statue, get real stiff and run like a statue, right? You can do that right there. And then you can say, okay, we're going to take all your bones out. So we're just like a big old rag and we're going to walk or run like we don't have bones in our body. You can enhance it that way. Getting in and out of a chair without sliding into it. You're going to notice in the toddlers, a lot of times when they get in the chair, they do it from the side and they slide in. Can they walk up to the chair with the chair behind them and sit down backwards? All right, that's a skill that we work on right there. Walking backwards, walking upstairs with one hand, all right, standing on one foot. So again, these are really good activities. Moving into your 2-year-old classroom, so your 24 to 36 month olds, balance is on a beam with both feet. So again, when you have a balance beam in your classroom, make sure that the teacher or the adult is within arm's reach, because again, what goes up must come down. They are above floor level, so we want to make sure that they are safe. Catches a large ball with their arm and body. We talked about this earlier right here. They're able to climb on playground equipment and ladders in a safe manner. Jumping backwards and forwards, really good activity for you to do right there. They can jump from the bottom step to the floor. Now again, it needs to be small. Keep them safe right there. Putting a small object on the floor and having them be able to jump over that small object. I like to use like a stuffed animal or a pillow or something like that. So again, if they hit it, it's not going to hurt them. But just being aware of that object and jumping over it. Runs a small distance and avoid obstacles. So you can create a little obstacle course there in your 2-year-old room. Very simple. Standing on one foot, being able to stand on their tiptoes, throwing a playground ball, and at this age group it's going to be underhanded right here, walking backwards, and then here we can practice walking downstairs, alternating feet, all right, left, right. And then last, we have our 48 to 60-month-old children. So these are your 4-year-old children attempting a somersault. Now, they don't have to master it, right? But just that attempting a somersault. And that's usually the head roll forward. Again, make sure that you've got a mat down. Make sure that there's adequate adult supervision, that they're safe. And just, again, developmentally, they are ready to attempt that somersault. Bouncing a ball 2 times and then catching it. So there is a difference between tossing a ball back and forth and then throwing a ball, letting it bounce, and then catching it. All right, that's a different skill right there. Catching that playground ball with both hands, hopping on 1 foot a distance, jumping forward 10 times without falling. Again, it's that momentum and balance we're looking at. Jump high, jump higher, right? You can play that game. Now we're going to be able to start practicing throwing a ball overhanded. So we've gone from underhanded to overhanded, and then walking on that balance beam independently, all right? And so that is physical development in an early education program. All right, so I know that was a lot of information in 1 short hour. Hopefully you got this information down. Feel free and go back and rewatch this video if needed, right? But we want to encourage that physical activity. We want it to be done appropriately and developmentally. Incorporate that active play, whether it's being done outside or inside. Make sure they're getting that 90 minutes of active play. Have a plan in place so that when you can't go outside due to weather, that you've got activities that are planned so that they can continue to get their physical activity even when they can't go outside. Again, this has become a very commonly cited standard in the minimum standards is when children are not able to go outside. People are not initiating active play, and you should, if they're supposed to go outside from 10 to 10:30 and it's raining or it's too hot, you need to be incorporating active play inside from 10 to 10:30. All right, it just doesn't turn into free play or do whatever in the classroom. You've got to supplement that time with active play. All right, get creative with this and have fun. All right, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to post the link for your assessment right here. And so those of you that are needing your certificate of completion, you can go ahead and do your worksheet. And so we'll get that on here. There you go. Thank you all so much for participating in today's Tim at 10. Make sure you watch my social media, watch my website. We've got a couple of more Tim at 10s coming up this month. I'll see you all very, very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye. Hey, welcome everybody. It's time for our training today. I hope everyone is having a wonderful, wonderful morning. Good morning to everyone that is joining us live on Facebook Live this morning. I am so excited about this topic. It's one of my favorite topics to do for the classroom, for directors to be able to coach and mentor their teachers. Just for us to learn the benefits of physical development and active play. I am super excited about this. So let's go ahead and get started because we have a lot of information to cover in this short period of time. Today's training is on physical development and active play for children in early education classrooms. Welcome again to everyone that is joining us live on Facebook. This is being recorded, so if you're not able to make it live, you can watch the recorded session. Or after attending today's class, if you know someone that would benefit from this information, please pass it along. If you want to have your teachers watch this, very, very beneficial for the classroom. All of that good stuff right there. So before we get started, let's go over our housekeeping items. This training has been approved by the Texas Early Childhood Professional Development System, otherwise known as TechPEDS. So before you complete your assessment at the end of the webinar, make sure that your personal TechPEDS ID number is entered on your Tim the Trainer portal. That way your training certificate is automatically uploaded into your TechPEDS account. I say automatically, it usually takes about 24 hours, but shows up the next day. Make sure that you take notes so that you can have discussions about this material with your leadership team, with your school family, with your coworkers, with whoever would benefit from having this discussion. Know that we are always here for you. If you have any questions about the material that we will be going over today, or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training material, there are several different ways that you can get a hold of me. If you go to our website, timthetrainer.com, up in the top right-hand corner, you can send a message directly to us. You can call us or you can email, again, with any questions that you have, or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training material, and then we can respond to you in a timely manner. Just one more quick reminder, anytime you are completing training or professional development, the total number of clock hours of training must be done in a reasonable amount of time. The way I like to define that is that you cannot complete more training hours in a single day than the total number of hours that you worked. You definitely cannot complete more clock hours of training in a single day than there are hours in a day, which is 24. All right, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If this is your first time joining us for our Facebook Lives, at the end of today's webinar, I will post a link for you to complete an assessment. That way you can get your training certificate for those of you that are following along. Again, if you this training has been approved by TechPEDS, so make sure that you have your personal TechPEDS ID number entered on your Tim the Trainer portal before you complete your assessment. That way your certificate will be automatically uploaded into your TechPEDS account. All right, let's go ahead and get going. We got a lot to cover today.